the COVID-19 national health emergency over 3 years into the COVID-19 pandemic.
Is the Philippines ready to follow suit?
I think we're almost ready for that. No? And this is based on what metrics we've been monitoring for the past month. Although the positivity rate has a slight uptick in some instances over the past month, but it's still below the 10%.
In other news, the health department says that the general population can now get their second booster shots against COVID-19. Before this, second boosters were only given out to health workers, senior citizens, and the immunocompromised.
The United States has ended its COVID-19 national emergency. Is the Philippines ready to do so too? And what will be the scenario when the health emergency is finally lifted? We sit down with DOH OIC Maria Rosario Bergeret tonight on the Chiefs. And welcome to the midweek edition of the Chiefs. I'm Ed Lingao, and joining us online is Ana Marie Pamintuan, the editor-in-chief of Philippine Star. And joining us in a little bit, I suppose, will be Robbie Lampay of One News here in the studio. Ami, magandang gabi and happy midweek.
Good evening.
Okay, what's your banner story?
Sumagot na yung Chief Prosecutor ng International Criminal Court,
Si
no?
Can.
Si Karim Khan. Sabi niya, mukhang ang tingin nila former President Duterte condoned and even encouraged some of the crimes, yung mga abuses daw in the campaign against illegal drugs.
Of course, just to put context there, he is the prosecutor, so you would expect him to push that investigation.
Yun yung sagot nila sa
Yes, appeal.
Government, di ba?
Yeah.
Na pinapatigil na ng gobyerno natin.
Yeah. And something we can ask, Justice Secretary Remulla, whom we are slated to interview in the next few days.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Ayun. Yeah.
Okay. Another thing, of course, is yung the health department finally agrees to
Pwede ka na.
to give the vaccine to the general public, the second booster dose.
Sayang milyon yung napasong vaccine at the end of March.
Oo.
Sayang.
Nakadalawang COVID na ako.
Oo nga, 2 weeks lang sana. 2 weeks lang yung nagamit sana.
Yeah.
Matatanong natin yun, di ba?
Yeah.
Sa guest.
Although I suppose from the DOH's point of view, you always err on the side of safety and caution So parati sila nakapreno pagdating sa waiting for all the data to come in before they agree to release this. Yeah.
Reklamo nga yung business sector, 5 billion daw na sayang nila. Dahil nga nag-expire din yung mga vaccine nila.
Yeah. So,
We can see clarity on that mamaya.
Yeah. That among other things, of course, we also do have other things in line. Among them, yung bagyo na ngayon nasa, I think, over the Bicol region and possibly will be approaching Luzon, Metro Manila.
Yung weekend daw naman
Yung weekend naman.
LPA na siya.
Yeah.
Pressure area na lang.
Yeah. And for the first half of our program tonight, we also will be talking to the Marine Science Institute to get an update on the oil spill in Mindoro. Medyo na backseat yung story ng oil spill because of the other things like EDCA, Balikatan, and the Decamus Lake. But now we bring back the issue of the oil spill and how the cleanup has been going and the medium and long-term effects of the oil spill on the environment. So we will be having that for our first guest, our first part of the program, and we will come back right after this break for that.
consultant of the Justice Department warns that the oil spill in Oriental Mindoro could reach the waters of the Tubataha Reef in Palawan.
A live-moving, dynamic entity na marami siyang masasagasaan. So pag pumiti ulit yung hangin, baka mahati siya, saan siya pupunta? Baka Puerto Princesa, Honda Bay, o kaya Tubataha. Baka umabot na Mindanao.
The sunken MT Princess Empress continues to spread and has reached Tablas Strait, which separates Mindoro from Panay and Romblon.
Tuloy-tuloy ang paglilinis, walang hinto. Kasi nandun pa nga, although konti na lang daw ang lumalabas dun sa barko kasi alam naman natin na pag-araw, walang hanggang doon naman yung paglilinis ng Coast Guard. Pagdating naman ng gabi, tinatanggal yung harang doon. So, lumulusot ito paggabi, lalo pa ngayon, medyo malakas ang halon mo. At ang halon na yun, papunta na naman sa Dalampasigan.
It's been 43 days since oil started leaking from the MT Princess Empress in Oriental Mindoro. Still, the oil spill has not been fully contained. How massive is the damage so far? We asked Dr. Irene Rodriguez of the UP Marine Science Institute, who joins us tonight. Good evening, ma'am, and welcome back to the Chiefs.
Evening.
Good evening, Ed. Good evening, Amy, and good evening to all your followers.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for joining us again. Always good to have you back. Ma'am, it's been a month and a half mula nang lumubog yung MT Princess Empress. Do we have a better grasp dun sa extent ng damage ng oil spill na ito?
Okay, so with regard to that, we need proof. So we need the data from the ground where parts of the oil has reached already. And this is a bit tricky to get at this point because as most of us are aware, we just came from a long holiday for the Holy Week observance. And although majority of the efforts of the national government agencies continued on over the holidays, a lot of volunteers, of course, prioritize their activities over this. And also we have a current weather condition right now with among
yes, ma'am. That's also
in the Philippines.
I suppose that's also a factor.
Yes, and with regard to among, we can actually take it as an opportunity also because increase in the weather, in the wave action will also lead to dispersal of the oil, and the dispersal of the oil will reduce, of course, the slick that's available on the surface, and then will spread its dispersal, and with that will lead to the action of the natural microorganisms present in the environment to reduce this oil into manageable particles.
Yes, ma'am. Although I was also wondering, ma'am, hindi ba yan double-edged sword in a sense kasi although the storm will bring more wave action which will help in breaking up the oil particles, at the same time you also lose the sun, and the sun I think also helps in breaking down the oil.
Yes, that is correct. So actually, physico-chemical parameters will actually have a lot of factor on the breakdown of the oil. And with the wave action increasing, but with temperature decreasing, we'll have a lot of these interrelated effects on the oil slick. But for now, what we're seeing, because the latest information that we had released in our bulletin last April 3, so from the satellite images that was released in around 19 kilometers long, and we need new information to validate what is now the current area occupied by the oil slick.
Doctor, the special vehicles are there na, no? Can you give us an idea kung ano na nga yung extent ng what has been determined, what has been established? Puro fuel oil lang ba o may kasama na talaga siya actually na yung karga no tanker? And how much of it kaya yung nagli-leak? Kung if it's the cargo, gaano kalala yung problema?
Okay, so based on information that was shared by the Philippine Coast Guard prior to the Holy Week break, about half of the cargo was already released into the water. That was their projection. And with regard to the identity of the identity of the oil that's already that are being observed in different areas of Oriental Mindoro and neighboring provinces, the Philippine Coast Guard already collaborated with the Department of Science and Technology, and they are working on fingerprinting the oil. And we'll have to wait for information from this collaborative effort from the PCG and DOST with regard to the fingerprinting.
So is there an effort to seal the leak? Or hindi na pwede i-seal? Are we going to just wait for everything to leak out?
Yes, there was an effort. So this was being done. So the information that reached us was bags, specialized bags from the UK will be deployed to trap the oil being released from the vessel. But for now, I have to validate or have to check if that was indeed deployed. Yung time frame kasi was April 1 to 2.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, can you explain that? Kasi, well, we have read about that bagging activity, but I'm certain it's quite different from the bagging that we know. For example, in SM, when they say bagging the oil, does that mean they're sealing the cracks of the ship, or does that mean they're collecting the oil that's leaking out of the ship, or does it mean that they're sucking out the oil?
It's merely collecting whatever is released from the vessel.
Okay.
So this bagging technique is actually just a temporary solution. So it's just for until they can figure out a way to seal it completely, or to pump out the oil from the vessel, whatever is remaining in the vessel.
Oh, okay. So we are not yet. We have not yet reached the point where we are already boring into the hull to pump out the oil. Wala pa tayo doon.
Wala pa po.
Okay. How does that look in terms of timetables? Are we running late? Because it's been a month and a half. I don't know. Are we on time? Are we running late as far as your view is concerned?
Yeah, so if we consider the original projections from considering theoretical seepage rate, we're probably, we can perhaps consider that we are almost past the immediate impact of the oil spill. But now we have to kick in efforts into early recovery. So both in the cleanup of the coast where the oil reached already, and also managing the socioeconomic impacts of the oil spill. Because
So
it's
now
been
we
43
have
days already.
Yeah. We now have a clearer idea no, kung gaano karami ang mawawala na yan na oil from yung maglilik. So can we now project how long it will take to revive the affected areas?
We're still going to, I'm talking about theoretical conditions here, so I'm still going to put it at around 6 months for the cleanup, and then for total rehabilitation will be around 1 to 3 years.
Oh dear. Yung within 6 months na yun, after 6 months, pwede na kaya mag-fishing after that?
That will largely depend on the water quality assessment being done by BIFAR, and also the assessment of the oil content or derivatives of polyaromatic hydrocarbons being detected in mussels and fish tissue.
Ma'am, I'm sure the residents and the people of Mindoro are wondering why can't they fish? Could you give us an idea what elements are involved here? For example, you have oil in the sea, and what the effect could be on the marine wildlife that people might be catching if they do go back to sea to fish.
Okay, so currently what BIFAR and DNR are doing are collecting water samples and ensuring that or determining if the water samples that are collected from areas that are projected to be affected by the oil spill contain oil or oil particulates, specifically polyaromatic hydrocarbons, because these are the ones that are dangerous. Okay, so aside from the water samples, they also collect fish, and also the important ones really are the ones that are not moving. So we need to get samples from the seashells, okay, so mussels and oysters, these types. And this will be monitored for polyaromatic hydrocarbons as well. So if the BIFAR cannot, or did their test already, and they say that samples do not contain polyaromatic hydrocarbons, then that's when they will issue a directive that, okay, fishing can resume. And by that time, then all other activities can proceed as before. But for now, we'll have to wait for BIFAR to issue that guideline.
Yes, ma'am. Well, ma'am, what I meant to ask was anong impact ng ingestion of fish that have polyaromatic hydrocarbons to the human body? Kasi yun nga, like I was saying, some people who depend on fishing would have a hard time finding justification for a fishing ban. So, in effect, bale, what would be the effect on their bodies pag ma-ingest ito?
Thanks, Ed, for the clarification. It's dangerous to ingest organisms that contain high amounts of polyaromatic hydrocarbons. This is a carcinogenic compound.
Okay.
So we should try to avoid it. Yeah. But of course, toxic and toxicity will depend on the amount of the substance contained in the organism. But the guideline values or the directives will be issued by BIFAR, because they also calculate how much is being eaten by one person on a normal meal, and how that will translate to risk associated with ingestion.
Doctor, we're getting conflicting reports about the movement of the oil spill. No, I understand. Of course, it's because iba-iba rin yung direction ng wind, yung water movement, ano? At totoo ba na it's approaching Palawan, specifically Coron and Tubataha?
Okay. So the reports that there are two directions being yung sa trajectory ng oil spill. Actually, that's because during the first part of March, when during the early stages of the oil spill, yung prevailing wind natin noon was pushing the oil towards the southern part of Oriental Mindoro, towards the direction of Cuyo Island and Coron. And then when the wind direction shifted, part of the oil was, yung new seepage was being directed towards the northern part, towards the area, towards the Verde Island Passage. So we were looking at two major slicks. One that's present on the southern part, yung papunta sa Cuyo, and then isa na may possibility na madala sa northern part towards the Verde Island Passage. So for now, yung two major slicks na yon, yung direction nun ngayon will be again governed by the prevailing wind direction. And for now, easterlies yung nagpe-prevail sa atin ngayon.
So hindi pa completely safe pala si Verde Island Passage. Pwede pa rin umabot nun, depende sa wind movement?
Yes, wind and also yung water movement also.
Ma'am,
And Palawan, baka nga umabot sa Coron, tama yung sinasabi ng iba. Tama ba yun?
Yung pong projection na nilabas namin ng April 3, may possibility na umabot ng Coron, pero now it's April 12, and then we're looking at yung natural na dispersal ng oil, and also some of it will evaporate and some of it will just be gone from the water surface. So in about, theoretically, we're talking theoretically lang po. So kung let's say meron kang 1 cubic meter ng oil na nasa surface water, about half of that will evaporate, half of that will be, about half of that will be dispersed. About 8% of that will evaporate. So we're looking at around 40 to 45% na may iwan after around 48 hours. Theoretical lang po yun.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, last question, pabol ko lang po. You did mention a while ago the estimates na mga kalahati ng laman ng MT Princess Empress has already been able to leak out and is already out in the wild. And another half, 450,000 liters siguro, still inside. How does that compare to yung nangyari sa Guimaras? I think sa Guimaras, nasa 500,000 liters yung nakalabas. Pero yun nga, hanggang doon lang. Ito, 450,000 tayo more or less. Pero nasa bagging pa lang tayo at we are not yet anywhere near sealing or pumping the oil out of the vessel.
If we're going to compare this with what happened in Guimaras, I think we're looking at a lot of positive sides dito sa Princess Empress.
Okay.
Kasi yung sa Guimaras, that was very near the coast. So yung 500,000 liters of oil na na-release sa environment, mabilis na nakarating sa coastal environment.
Ramdam.
Whereas here now, offshore, majority of the oil slick. Kaya nga, very important yung rapid na response ng Philippine Coast Guard and other national government agencies. Yun yung pinakamaganda dito kasi we already, the Philippine Coast Guard really were there right from the start. And DNR also did a lot of work already. Nung nalaman nila agad, they already set up task force, and then yung effort, although independent yung first few days of the response, pero naging very coordinated siya, of course with the help of Governor Dolor of Oriental Mindoro.
Okay.
Doctor, isa na lang pahabol, Kasi apart from the fishermen, yung tourism, tinamaan din yung mga may-ari ng resorts, ngayon ng Holy Week, masama loob nila. Marami daw umiwas sa kanila. So, nakikita namin, the images are so ugly, no? Kapag ganung nalagyan ng oil slick yung white beach mo, how long will it take for that beach to be restored to its original state?
Okay, so for this type of coast, pwede namang ipalinis yung sand mismo. Okay, so there's a way to do that. Okay, so just get the sand from the coast and then idadaan ito sa proper treatment. Okay, may mga companies naman tayo, may mga treaters tayo na kaya itong gawin. And then after cleaning, just put the sand back to the beach. Okay, and we do understand that the tourism industry will be hit, or really is hit because of this oil spill. And it's just, siguro ito isa sa mga factors na kailangan nating tingnan moving forward, how to prevent this and also to factor this in na hindi lang yung fishing activities, kundi pati tourism activities. We have to look at the socio-economic aspect of the effect of the oil spill.
Okay. Dr. Irene Rodriguez of the UP Marine Science Institute. Ma'am, maraming salamat for joining us tonight. Always a pleasure to have you on board.
Thank you, Doctor.
Maraming salamat.
Thank you, ma'am. And as promised, we will be having the head of the Department of Health in a little bit. So please do stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back. welcome back to the program. As promised, joining us now is Department of Health Officer in Charge, Maria Rosario Berjere. Dr. Berjere, magandang gabi and welcome back to the Chiefs.
Good evening. Magandang gabi po sa inyo.
Thank you, ma'am, for joining us tonight. Good to have you back on board. Ma'am, I'm sure you've been asked this before, pero everybody's talking about yung lifting ng state of emergency sa US. And of course, people are also asking what are the chances of that happening here in the Philippines and when? But can you run us through kasi I suppose there are a lot of implications of that if you lift the state of emergency, both legal, logistical, and possibly even political implications if you do lift the state of emergency. Ano po yun? What would happen if they do that here?
Yes, sir. No? So, unang-una po, I just like to say that each country has its own context. So, even though meron na pong ibang bansa o isang bansa na nag-lift ng kanilang state of public health emergency, it will depend on the context and situation of the country. So, for our country, the Philippines, aside from, of course, we are still monitoring our cases, not just our cases, but our capacity of our healthcare system para tayo ay prepared talaga if and when we lift the state of public health emergency. And aside from that, we need to be able to prepare yun pong mga implications naman to policy. Because we know that ito pong public health emergency are tied with some of our policies that we are implementing for the funds.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That's what we want to go into. For example, the availability of vaccines for free to the public as well. Yung indemnity funds and yung ayuda, I suppose. So when you talk about lifting, when people talk about lifting, ano magiging impact po nun dun sa mga ganung mga elements?
Actually, ang elements po na natira because most of this were linked to the state of calamity. So ang natira po sa public health emergency would be the health emergency allowance of our healthcare workers. Plus ang critical po kasi dito would be the authority of the Director General of the Food and Drug Administration to issue out emergency use authorities for these different technologies that we are using now for the response. Katulad po ng bakuna, katulad po ng mga investigational drugs na wala pa hong mga CPR, nakalink po yan sa public health emergency.
Pero akala ko, it was lifted with the, yung state of calamity na hindi na nga pwedeng In fact, yun ang pinoproblema ng ibang tao na hindi na daw makakapag-donate ang COVAX kung hindi i-extend yung state of public calamity. Tama ba yun?
Kasi po, yung sa state of calamity, ang nakalink po talaga doon would be our RA 11525. That would be the National Vaccination Law. The National Vaccination Law includes our clauses or our authority to enter into agreements where we will have indemnifications and also immunity from liability. Pero dito sa public health emergency po, hindi po siya nakalink. So dun sa state of calamity, that's why ngayon po we're having challenges in our agreements with these countries who would like to donate and also with COVAX. Kasi hindi po kami maka-enter into this agreement where we are going to have these clauses for immunity from liability kasi wala ho tayong basis for policy kapag kaganyan. Kaya pinag-uusapan pa po yan.
So wala pang nakikitang remedyo dyan because you have been saying that you will try to find a way to, well, not to go around it, but to just push ahead with it kung ano man yung legal remedy, no? Will it need legislation?
Yes, ma'am. I think the most concrete option for now is legislation, and this would be through our Center for Disease Control Bill because we have already included into the provisions of this bill. Ito pong dalawang clauses na kailangan natin to enter into such agreements. We had been in close coordination with OSG, with DOJ, and the Office of the President through their ODESLA, yung legislative affairs nila. At talaga pong we are exploring all possible remedies legally. Kaya lang po mukhang ang pinaka-concrete natin option ngayon would be the CDC bill.
Medyo matagal-tagal pa yun, Doctor. Baka abutin niya several months at least.
Well, the President has declared and has pronounced that this is an urgent bill. So ang commitment naman po, hopefully by June, it will be passed already.
Ma'am, pero in real terms, given na the bill is not yet there, I mean, the bill is not yet law, in real terms, what's the effect of that on our procurements of the vaccines? You mentioned kasi kanina that we're having some difficulty in securing some contracts for these vaccines because of indemnification, among other things. How far back is the timetable getting pushed, for example?
Actually, we're not procuring because we still have a lot of doses left in our warehouses for these monovalent vaccines. That's why we are just going through this form of donations for these bivalent vaccines. Kaya lang nga po, yun nga po, kulang tayo ng mga provisions or policy basis for us to continue on with the negotiations. Hopefully by June, we'll be able to do that already.
By June, that's 2 months. 2 months from now pa.
That's for the bivalent, ano?
Yes, ma'am. That's for the bivalent.
Well, in the meantime, the Department of, you announced today that even now, the general population can now everyone can avail themselves of second boosters. So yung iba nangihinaya kasi yung iba, millions of doses expired at the end of March. That's for the primary and for the boosters, no? Mga ilan ba yung apektado actually? How many doses were wasted at the end of March? How many expired na lang?
Well, I do not have the exact number of how many expired last March because meron ho tayong kinarantine ng mga bakuna dyan kung saan hanggang sa ngayon inaantay po natin kung papayagan tayong ma-extend pa rin yung ma-re-extend yung shelf life. What I can tell our citizens would be that we have enough doses currently for us to be able to provide to our general population. And just to clarify also, ma'am, that these second boosters that were already allowed would be from 18 years old and above, no? From 18 to 59, dapat po 6 months interval from their first booster shots because this is the second booster shot. And we will start our implementation or yung bakunahan po nito mag-uumpisa kapag na-release na ho namin yung guidelines.
Doctor, what went into the decision? Kasi you were telling us you want everything to be based on science, no? And people were, there were, I think, quite a number of people who wanted their second boosters. Pero natagalan nga eh. So, what finally convinced you? What finally convinced you na pwede na nga yung general population?
Well, it was still science, ma'am. Actually, the Food and Drug Administration has long been evaluating this application coming from our manufacturers for these second booster shots for the general population. Enough evidence was generated and presented to the Food and Drug Administration and also to our Health Technology Assessment Council. So for this time that the EUA was updated based on this evidence, the HTAC already also concurred. So ebidensya pa rin po ang ginamit natin para po makapag-desisyon tayo na ibigay na sa general population.
Although, ma'am, admittedly, some people are really wondering why it took us that long to establish whether or not may benefit yung second booster dose for the general population, considering the first booster dose was in January pa of last year, at least as far as I was concerned. Isang buong taon po.
Actually, hanggang sa ngayon naman po, scarce pa rin yung evidence para sabihin na ang booster na second dose would be beneficial really to the general population. Although some experiences from other countries were also included as part of the evidence, kaya po nabigyan na rin ng updated EUA itong mga manufacturers for the second booster shot.
Ma'am, by any chance yung difficulty in getting the bivalent doses, you mentioned baka by June pa or possibly even later. Did that have anything to do with the decision to roll out the second booster shots for the general public?
No, sir. Actually, we were already drafting our guidelines for the bivalent where it is already going to be part or integrated into our program for vaccination of COVID-19. Nagkataon lamang po talaga na nagkaroon tayo ng roadblock because of this need for policy basis for the Office of the President to authorize the Department of Health to enter into this agreement. Kasi nga po wala tayong pagbabasihan ngayon for us to have this immunity from liability because Katulad nga ng sabi po ng Department of Justice and OSG, it's just like we are going to give up our sovereign rights when we do that. Kaya kailangan po talaga ng masusing pag-aaral at saka yung pong batas na pwedeng pagbasihan ng ganitong pag-enter natin sa ganitong agreements.
Doctor, we just went through a long Holy Week break and you saw the images. Parang wala ng pandemya, di ba? Everyone was having fun, everyone was going on vacation. But we still are in a national emergency. Pero people think, are we nearing endemicity? Where are we now in terms of the pandemic?
As we have reported a while ago, nakakakita po tayo ng slight increases in certain parts of the country, specifically in the National Capital Region and in the Mindanao area. Although we are seeing this kind of increases, we cannot say that it's significant because our hospitals are still having manageable admissions. Katulad ng lagi namin sinasabi, we need to shift our mindset already. The cases would always be here. Hindi po tayo mawawala ng kaso because the virus is here to stay. As long as our hospitals are okay, and then we can say that it is a manageable situation for us. Although we constantly remind our public na nandito pa yung virus, kailangan tuloy-tuloy pa rin yung pag-protect natin sa ating sarili. So we choose to wear our mask kapag maraming tao at saka magpapabakuna pa tayo.
Would you say the risk is similar to the flu or maybe dengue?
In that context, the risk for transmitting and the risk for having the illness might be the same with the flu. Because it is a droplet and when you are in a closed space, it becomes airborne. Pero yun pong risk for the risk of dying from this illness might be higher for COVID-19 compared to the flu. I cannot compare this to dengue kasi dengue would require a vector, the mosquitoes, for you to get that.
Pero ma'am, as far as yung severity is concerned, it's still a lot worse than the flu.
Yes, we can see that, because even for those who are healthy adults or even children can get severe illness and they can also die compared to the flu, where most of those who are at risk of dying or having the severe complications of the disease would be those senior citizens already or those with severe illnesses.
I don't know, ma'am, if you've been doing any projections, pero I suppose people are also wondering, what would it look like for the Philippines by the end of the year and maybe by next year as far as COVID is concerned?
We're very much hopeful that within the year, hopefully, we can also transition into this new normal that we all had been longing for. Ibig sabihin, baka sakasakali towards the end of, nearing the end of the year, we can already also have that state where public health emergency is not here anymore or we are not implementing that anymore. But as I've said a while ago in our media forum, we need to monitor closely. We're doing that. We are closely doing our monitoring and we are trying to better prepare our system so that if we lift the public health emergency, we are all assured that our system is ready if and when cases will increase, especially the admissions. And also, of course, in parallel, we need to prepare our policy environment where even though without the public health emergency, we can still continue on with the response and do our procurement, receive donations because we have policy basis for such.
Speaking of preparation, that's also what people want to know, no? After 3 years, are we ready for the next pandemic?
I can say now that we are better prepared compared to the time that we've started off with the pandemic. When we started off with the pandemic, laboratories was just one, actually, our ITM. Now we have 300 plus laboratories that can already confirm your illness. Second, before, our number of facilities or beds that can be available for certain types of illness was really very low. Pero ngayon po, ngayon meron tayong vacancy of beds for almost 2,000 ICU beds for COVID-19, almost 19,000 ward beds for COVID-19. So I think our hospitals, our laboratories, our healthcare system was able to prepare and nakita natin kasi yung weaknesses ng ating healthcare system and we were able to address that. Although I cannot say that we are 100% prepared we are still trying to better prepare, and the CDC will play a big role for us to become more prepared for upcoming pandemics.
Doctor, everything is easier in hindsight, ano? But anyway, in hindsight, what do you think we could have done better in responding to this?
Well, in hindsight, I cannot think of anything that we could have done better, because I think what we have done was tremendous and was remarkable, because alam natin ang weaknesses ng healthcare system, pero nakita natin yung pagtutulong-tulungan ng whole of society during the time that we started off, kaya tayo nakaagapay. And hopefully, in the coming years, that if ever there would be another pandemic, we can still see the same cooperation, collaboration, and working together among all sectors of society.
Well, Ma'am, I don't know if this is too early to ask, but I'll try to ask it anyway. You did mention that we have around 300 new labs that were built. In other words, we have a whole infrastructure built purposely because of the pandemic of COVID-19. Labs among them, 300 more or less. I'm wondering lang how we transition from these labs with COVID-19 to the future. I mean, what will happen to all the infrastructure that has been built up? Will they be able to transition to something else?
Yes, actually, we're trying to transition already because we do not like to waste our resources. So these laboratories are now being oriented on how we can transition for us to use them also for other illnesses. Actually, dito po sa ginagamit natin sa COVID-19, nagagawa din po yan for other viruses as well as for the other illnesses. Aside from that, our healthcare facilities, kung matatandaan nyo po, marami po tayong pinut up na mga facilities like temporary treatment and monitoring facilities. Amin na pong tinatransition yan, katulad po ng mga pinagawa natin ng mga parang container vans na nilagay sa QI, nilagay sa ibang mga places, nilalagay na ho natin yan doon sa ating mga ospital na malalaki ang spasyo or area so that it can add up to their ward beds para magamit din po. So all of this, we are already transitioning para the resources would still be maintained and used, and we did not waste anything because of this pandemic.
Well, one of the weaknesses of our health system, even before the pandemic, is the lack of health professionals. Kanina nag-rally yung mga nurses and they're demanding 50,000 entry, I think that's entry-level salary, What's your position on that?
Well, unang-una, ang posisyon ng Kagawaran ng Kalusugan, ma'am, we will always support our healthcare workers, especially in terms of improved salaries and benefits. Pero we all need to be realistic about this. Kailangan unang-una mapag-aralan maigi, makita natin yung fiscal space ng ating gobyerno kung kakayanin ba talaga na mabigyan natin ang ating mga nurses ng ganitong entry level na salary. Pangalawa, kailangan din being realistic at that, we need to look at the entire picture. It is not just healthcare workers or nurses that we have for healthcare workers. When we improve or increase the salaries of our nurses, we also would want to increase the salaries of our other allied healthcare professionals. At kapag ginawa natin yan, mas malaking requirement for budget ang kakailanganin din natin. Pangatlo, pag ginawa natin yan, kailangan makita natin yung balance between the public and the private. We do not like the difference right now that we are seeing where there is this disparity between the salaries of the public and the private sector workers, kung saan nagkakaroon ng bad implication where the private sector healthcare workers are migrating to the public sector because of salaries. We would like to balance that off and have this kind of standardized salaries between the public and the private. But we are studying now the market kasi when we do that, we need to cushion the smaller private facilities which cannot adjust to this kind of salary increases. So marami ho tayong kailangang pag-aralan, pero ang sinasabi ko lang ngayon, tayo po ay makikipagtrabaho with our, of course, legislators, the Department of Budget and Management, and of course, our nurses group and our other allied healthcare professionals group para po mas maitaas natin ang antas ng benepisyo at salaries ng ating healthcare workers. But everything has to be done realistically.
So what are the possibilities kaya? Kasi there was a recent report na it's actually a global problem na emerging economies, developing countries are having a hard time holding on to their health professionals kasi there's such a high demand globally and the advanced economies can afford to recruit from other countries. Tayo hindi naman natin ma-replace as quickly, no? They need experience, syempre, they need training. Ano kaya yung possibility so we can hold on to our health workers?
Yes, ma'am. It is indeed I think, in my opinion, it's a global crisis already because I recently attended an international meeting where smaller countries, the Pacific Island groups, other countries were also complaining because their healthcare workers are also migrating out of their countries because they are being enticed by these higher salaries being given by high-income countries. So here in the Philippines, our strategies, we've laid it out. We are trying to consult a certain specific professional groups already. Unang-una, ang gusto natin makita that there would be bilateral agreements. Like if our nurses will be recruited in other countries, the country which is recruiting our nurses should give us something in return. Like, for example, for every 10 nurses that they get, there should be 10 individuals that they would send off for scholarship so that we can also replace here. So we need to have this kind of agreements with this country so that hindi naman tayo laging nasa losing end and we can also be able to retain our individuals or nurses here in the country.
Is that a Philippine initiative or a global initiative?
This is something that is being thought of and discussed among us in the Department of Health of the Philippines. In other countries, I have not heard of this kind of agreements yet. Although in that international meeting, there was this strong position among the smaller income countries nga, that it should be discussed already at that international globe or globally, that there should be this kind of ethical recruitment and that there should be some form of regulation so that we can be able to avoid itong drain of healthcare workers among lower income countries.
Ma'am, that's an interesting concept, ethical recruitment. How could that be? I don't know. I don't know if you have an answer to this already. But how could that be conceptualized and enforced? Treaties or multilateral agreements?
Yes, actually, there is this avenue where we can discuss that, and that would be during World Health Assemblies, which is hosted by the World Health Organization. So during these assemblies, we discuss this kind of health matters where we can put that as part of the agenda. We just need to position and, of course, have our embassy help us, the Department of Foreign Affairs, through also our WHO country offices. So I think this would be part of the agenda because it is not just our country which is experiencing this. A lot of countries are experiencing, even the high-income countries are experiencing their shortage. That's why they're getting our nurses and other healthcare workers from the different countries across.
But you will need to get the health workers on board, no? Paano pag sinabi nila, bakit mo naman kami pipigilan to look for greener pastures abroad?
Hindi naman
Anong isasagot nyo kapag gano'n?
Yeah, hindi naman po sa pipigilan. Actually, we always would say that would always be the right of our healthcare workers. That would be their right if they want to go abroad for greener pastures. Pero kailangan mapag-usapan pa rin within or between and among countries how this recruitment should be done as ethically as possible. Kasi yung iba talaga, they set up nursing schools already here in our country. We have identified 2 nursing schools that are owned by other countries and are producing for them already and not for our country. So this kind of agreement should be done and should be discussed in the global picture. Hindi na lang po dito talaga because it's really affecting us. But nevertheless, we already have identified strategies and we have presented to the President already. I think that was about a month ago, where the President already instructed CHIEFS to start working with universities. At kanina po, nag-attend ako ng International Nurses Forum, and I discussed with the Dean of the UP College of Nursing as well as the other deans there, na sila po ay makikipagtulungan sa atin with the Department of Health on setting up strategies on how we can better retain and also be able to ensure that there is reintegration of our nurses coming from abroad going back to the country.
Pwede ba mag-operate yung other countries ng educational institution here? Or ano yun? May dami ba yun? You mentioned two institutions.
Yes, ma'am. I think there would be a dummy kasi pagka foreign, hindi naman ikaw basta-basta makapag-set up ng business mo rito. So I think there would be this kind of accredited universities already that had been linked to these countries that are recruiting our nurses. So wala pa po, sir, no? Although we had some discussions, meetings about universal healthcare and all, and he was mentioning that we need to do this and do that, and maybe that's the time that we can decide.
Okay. Well, ma'am, always a pleasure to have you on board. We'd like to have you back soon. Maraming salamat for joining us tonight, Health OIC Maria Rosario Vergere.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Maraming salamat po. Thank you.
And that's all we have for the Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. I'm Ed Lingao.
Ay, mami ko na magpupunta.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.